I find myself these days doing a lot of introspection and thinking about how I use my 5 minutes, my voice, when people ask me to speak in the public forum. And in thinking, I also do quite a bit of praying about what I should say, because there's so much that could be said. And for this particular event, a little voice inside kept saying, "Paloma, speak about light." And I thought, okay, well, how do I deal with light in the context of film? And two stories which are related to film came to mind. The first has to do with a documentary series that was made here a couple of years ago in 2010 called Guyana Pepper Pot. That was one of the first structured programs coming out of the Center for Communication Studies under a project with Ohio University and USAID. And out of that project, which was done in the summer, quite like this program that we're witnessing today, 10 documentaries came out. We were working across boundaries with people who are used to making news, students from the Center for Communication Studies, the team from Ohio University, people who are in the theater, and so on. And what I remember most vividly about that process was when we showed the films, the documentaries, back to the people who we made them about, and the subjects were quite varied. They were about nature, they were about ethnicity, they were about social issues, they were about domestic violence, quite a number of issues. The first thing that they said to us is, "Oh my gosh, I didn't see it like that. I didn't see myself in that light." So the subjects of the documentaries themselves had a kind of reflexive moment, a moment in which they saw themselves outside of themselves, and then they could actually analyze their conditions. And then people who were not part of the documentaries, but who were just audience, like yourselves, and like me, they said, "We never saw that particular issue in that light." I remember one very gripping story that we shot was about a prostitute, and she was telling her whole vivid story about all the things she'd done, what she had not done, why she had done it. And we had this great struggle about whether to show her face or not, which was ethically not, I think, should not have been done, and we didn't do it in the end. But she was in the audience when that documentary was shown. And I remember she came afterwards and she said, "Oh my gosh, you know, I never thought about what I did in quite that light." So this is one of the things that documentaries do. They tend to make us see things differently. They tend to give us the perspective of the person that we're making a film about, and they tend to help us to walk in shoes that we would never walk in. And that is, I think, a wonderful thing to be able to do and to do well. The second story has to do with what is now known as Cine Guyana, which came out of this documentary process a year later with a young filmmaker who I consider to be a really huge influence on certainly new film in Guyana. His name is Ryan Zam. And we had this small grant from the government, the then government of the country, and we had his desire, having made the documentaries he had made before, to come back to Guyana. And his great love for film, he was an MFA student at the time at Ohio University. And I remember talking to him for over about a 3-month period, trying to work out how we were going to make the money that we had do everything that we wanted to do. Because we had kind of assessed that we didn't have people who were trained, and we certainly didn't have cinematic equipment. And here we were, undertaking to make films, and not one, we were undertaking to make several. And I recall very, very, very vividly, very important thing that he said to me. He said, "Paloma, to make a great film, you don't need fancy equipment. All you need is a good story passion, and great lighting. If you saw Kojo McPherson's film, it's wonderful, isn't it? Yeah. Right, so Kojo McPherson was part of that process, one of our brightest and greatest students who came out of that process. And if you saw what he did with lights in that film, he's not using a huge, big, fancy camera. He's using his desktop to edit with some nice equipment, some software, but he basically used light very effectively to kind of give us that sense of hope, of light, of dark, of hopelessness, and again, in the end, of just being able to overcome. And he did all of that with wonderful lighting.